This is Ian Hartley.
I am Warren Kay.
And I am Sasha Steenbergen.
Welcome to the Rediscovering God Dialogue.
We invite you to join us as we endeavor to see Him more clearly
And love Him more dearly while following Him more nearly. So we're continuing in Genesis chapter 21, I believe that's 21, yes. Part 2, and this podcast is on Abraham's covenant with Abimelech. And so we'll pick it up at verse 22. Sasha?
About this time, Abimelech came with Phicol, his army commander, to visit Abraham. God is obviously with you, helping you in everything you do, Abimelech said. Swear to me in God's name that you will never deceive me, my children, or any of my descendants. I have been loyal to you, so now swear that you will be loyal to me and to this country where you are living as a foreigner.
So first of all, Abimelech is a title like Pharaoh.
Oh, it's not a name.
No, it's not a name.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have the conundrum of him visiting Abimelech and then many years later visiting him again. You sort of wonder how long this guy could live.
I can remember when I was reading my Bible through and I thought, this Abimelech, he keeps showing up. And that does help solve that conundrum.
That's awesome.
Okay, now, why do you think he came with his army commander?
Well, I'm thinking that Abraham's camp has grown to such an extent that he's concerned about their safety. If he's living in their land, and he just wants to make sure that he's can be trusted at not to turn against them.
Okay. So he brings Phicol along just to impress Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
He's got an army, and it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So notice what he says. God is obviously with you, helping you in everything you do. So your idea that Abraham's encampment is now very large and is prospering.
Mm-hmm.
And so he concludes that God is really blessing him.
Mm-hmm.
So this next verse, swear to me in God's name that you will never deceive me. What's all that about?
Well, that's an interesting statement for a pagan ruler to make, who Abraham, in his previous dialogue with him, was convinced that this man could care less about God, and was surprised to discover that God had come to him in a vision and corrected Abraham. And so I think this man had some, certainly a recognition that there was a God that he understood.
Mm-hmm.
See, now I can tell you're a preacher. You go off on this moral tangent, which is legit, but it's not actually what's happening here.
Oh,
look, Abraham had deceived Abimelech before.
True.
About his wife.
Yeah.
And God came to him in a vision and said, don't touch that woman. She's another man's wife. Not only that, but his harem goes wonky and all the women can't have children. So this was over a period of time that Abraham associated with Abimelech, and he had lied to him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the background to the statement, swear to me that in God's name that you won't deceive me again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is where Phicol comes in, just to make sure we know we're serious now.
Yeah. So yeah, you have the prophet of God who's deceiving a pagan king, and the pagan king is rebuking him for it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Can you think of a parallel in modern times? You see, I've thought about this, so let me come clean. You know, Seventh-day Adventists are known for wanting a steal of a deal. They're always ready to wheel and deal and get enough coupons or maximum discount or whatever it is. Maybe not you, Sasha, because you seem to be belonging to a rich family, flying helicopters and jet planes and who knows what else.
I'm a girl of modest means.
So, you know, I'll never forget the story of a pastor who went to a watchmaker and said, I want a clock for my church. And they found the right clock. And then the watchmaker said, the pastor said, what's the price? Watchmaker told it. And then he said, I suppose you want a discount because you're a pastor. And the pastor said, no, I don't want a discount. God looks after me and we can afford to pay a fair price. You charge me whatever's fair. And the watchmaker said, wow, I've never heard that before. Where's your church?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So Abraham had also deceived the Pharaoh this way. You know, that's where he got started, passing off Sarai as his sister. So in the next chapter, in the previous chapter, we talked about 4 generations of deceivers. This is a family trait. I was doing this with another group and somebody said, well, we're all doing it. But Abimelech is not famous for being a deceiver, but Abraham is. We're on verse 24 and 25.
Abraham replied, yes, I swear to it. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well that Abimelech's servants had taken by force from Abraham's servants.
Okay, now what's going on here? So Abraham is caught out. So he switches the topic of conversation to find some relief for himself. Come on now, let's be honest. We do the same thing. You know, you're late again, yes, but a month ago you didn't even show up. So Abraham realizes there's no way out of this for him. So he agrees to it and then immediately switches the topic. And attack is the better way of defense sometimes. That's what he's doing here. So it's uncommon when this is not done in a dialogue or an argument or whatever you want to call it. And here's where the statement that Jesus went dumb before his shearers is relevant. It means that Jesus just simply accepted it and didn't go on the route that Abraham's just gone. Now, you can find exceptions. For instance, in Matthew 23, Jesus really tears a strip off the religious leaders. He calls them serpents and whitewashed graves and who knows what other epithets. But it's his body language that counts. You know, he is weeping over the dreadful moral state these religious leaders are in. And we know that because the end of the chapter, Jesus says, Jerusalem, oh Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not.
So this is what you're describing is really following the line of finding a scapegoat. That
Yes.
when you find a scapegoat, it resolves the issue between the two of us because we now are opposed to the scapegoat. And that's what he's done. He's found his servants to become the scapegoat, and so they can agree to deal with that problem rather than be in opposition to each other.
Good insight.
Mhm.
So we become friends because we've now found a common enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a common perpetrator.
Anyone who well, how does that saying go? Anyone who shares the enemy with me as a friend or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't come to mind, but sounds right to me.
It's similar to that.
We're on verse 26.
This is the first I've heard of it, Abimelech answered. I have no idea who is responsible. You have never complained about this before.
Mm-hmm. So notice that Abimelech returns the favor. Okay, you got me on that, but you've never complained about it before.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how this story illustrates human nature.
Yeah.
And the way we often, is this a dialogue or a debate?
I think it's a debate.
Yeah, they're debating each other. Each one's trying to make his point with the other one.
Yeah.
Neither of them is listening to hear what the other one is actually trying to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking as we were reading that last text there, I was thinking about what would have happened if Abraham would have been able to take a minute and go, okay, so right now I've got, the Pharaoh, so to speak, and, the head of the army guy here. If I could just let the ego go for a second, what would it be like to go, you know what, you're totally right. I did, deceive you before. And so I totally get why you wouldn't want that to happen again. So I really hear you. And yes, I would love to commit to being in an honest relationship with you. And just to see like how that could have changed things, and had the egos sort of been set aside, I picture that Abimelech would have been like, oh, really? Oh, let's get that sorted, without lobbying it back to him. Lobbing it back, yeah.
Yeah, and admission of a fault often leads to a reciprocal admission.
Right, yeah.
It's interesting, Sasha, that you a couple of times mentioned ego. I've often wondered if women were heads of states and presidents of countries, if things would end up working much more smoothly.
I wondered that too.
Yeah.
More dialogue, perhaps.
Hope so.
Do you want to have a serious discussion along these lines?
It's an assumption that I have. I have not done any research to know. But my assumption is that there would be fewer wars for sure.
Yeah.
Of course, you need to. You see, you egging me on now.
Mm-hmm.
The lady who was Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, she was a real hawk.
Oh.
Yeah. And Margaret Thatcher of England, she was on to those Argentinians in the Falkland Islands, just like as quick as you could say zap. She was there. So let me see, how can I sort of end this amicably?
I was just going to say, I think Warren may have, in mind some of the important women in his life where he has seen very respectful dialogue perhaps happening, thinking, might be a good thing.
Maybe. And I might remind Warren of Danielle Smith. Okay, let's change the subject.
I think we better get back to Genesis. I'll put my ego back in its pocket and admit that my research was not very well done.
We're on 27 to 29.
Abraham then gave some of his sheep, goats, and cattle to Abimelech, and they made a treaty. But Abraham also took 7 additional female lambs and sent them off by themselves. Abimelech asked, "Why have you set these 7 apart from the others?"
Okay.
Abraham replied, "Please accept these 7 lambs to show your agreement that I dug this well." Then he named the place Beersheba, which means well of the oath, because that was where they had sworn the oath.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to 27 first. Abram gives sheep, goats, and cattle to Abimelech, and they make a treaty. The treaty is that Abram's going to have access to the well of Beersheba. So Beersheba is not directly in Philistine territory. It's sort of in the wilderness. It's controlled by them, but it will later become part of Israel, but not Philistine territory. Philistine territory never actually becomes part of Israel, much later on. And it still isn't today because Gaza is not part of Israel.
So, Ian, I've just a question. Are some of these sheep and goats and cattle that he gives, is the treaty for the well, or is it possible that the treaty is that he will not turn against them? Swear to me in God's name that you'll never deceive me. And then the 7 were for the well.
Okay, a little difference. The first set of animals is that it's guaranteeing Abram that he has right to this well, to the water.
Okay.
Okay, and then the additional 7 ewes, which is a very valuable gift, because these are all female animals which are going to reproduce. So this is a very special bit of wealth that's being transferred here. And this is so that Abimelech will agree that Abraham actually dug the well. So this is important to Abraham. Ego, whatever, that he actually dug it. And he makes it very enticing for Abimelech to buy into this agreement. First, general animals are to secure water access at this well. And the second group of animals is acknowledgement that Abram actually dug the well.
Okay.
That's very interesting, because at first I was like, if this is like a Pharaoh kind of guy, like, are these 6, lambs going to even make a difference to him? Like if he has a lot of wealth. But I hear what you're saying in the sense that, this is going to be able to create a big herd and all that kind of stuff. But it is very interesting that, it's not like he was just saying, could you please just acknowledge that I dug this well? He's like, if you, accept these, it's because you are agreeing that I did this. It's very, very interesting tact.
So we're on verse 31.
32.
Yeah, 32. After making...
No, wait a bit. We haven't read verse 31 yet, I don't think. And if we have, please read it again.
Okay. Then he named the place Beersheba, which means well of the oath, because that was where they had sworn the oath.
Okay. So water is a great asset in this part of the world. I mean, it's wilderness, arid, desert. And so for Abraham to have access to reliable water is very important. And we've run into this situation before. I want us to read Genesis 16:14. Genesis 16:14.
Which says, so that well was named Ber Lo Roy, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can be found between Kadesh and Bered.
Yeah, so this is the well that was revealed to Hagar.
Right, yes.
Now, we've got another well in 21 verse 19, Genesis 21:19.
Then God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well full of water. She quickly filled her water container and gave the boy a drink.
During the Exodus, water will miraculously gush out from the rock for the encampment. Exodus 15:22 to 27. Exodus 15:22 to 27.
Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Shur. They traveled in this desert for 3 days without finding any water. When they came to the oasis of Marah, the water was too bitter to drink, so they called the place Marah, which means bitter. Then the people complained and turned against Moses. "What are we going to drink?" they demanded. So Moses cried out to the Lord for help, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and this made the water good to drink. It was there at Marah that the Lord set before them the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all his decrees, then I will not make you suffer any of the diseases I sent on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." After leaving Marah, the Israelites traveled on to the oasis of Elim, where they found 12 springs and 70 palm trees. They camped there beside the water.
Thank you. So notice the connection. Moses is shown a kind of a tree that he throws into the well, and that heals the water. And now that the Israelites have seen that, God says to them, "I'll protect you from all the diseases of Egypt." Like, there's the connection. How did I heal the water? Was a miracle. How am I going to prevent the diseases of Egypt decimating you? Same miracle. One more in Exodus 17, verse 1 to 7. Exodus 17, 1 to 7.
At the Lord's command, the whole community of Israel left the wilderness of Sin and moved from place to place. Eventually, they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water there for the people to drink. So once more, the people complained against Moses. "Give us water to drink," they demanded. "Quiet," Moses replied. "Why are you complaining against me, and why are you testing the Lord?" But tormented by thirst, they continued to argue with Moses. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? They're ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Walk out in front of the people. Take your staff, the one you used when you struck the water of the Nile, and call some of the elders of Israel to join you. I will stand before you on the rock at Mount Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will come gushing out. Then the people will be able to drink." So Moses struck the rock as he was told, and water gushed out as the elders looked on. Moses named the place Massah, which means test, and Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with Moses and tested the Lord by saying, "Is the Lord here with us or not?"
So water is a huge factor in this wilderness journey of the Israelites. And then eventually there's water that flows from a rock every time they camp. And Paul tells us in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 10, that rock was Jesus that accompanied them, and he provided the water every time they needed water for the encampment. We're on 32.
After making their covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech left with Phicol, the commander of his army, and they returned home to the land of the Philistines. Then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree near Beersheba, and there he worshipped the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham lived as a foreigner in the Philistine country for a long time.
Yeah, it's a lot in these few verses. So when Abimelech leaves with Phicol, the commander of his army, that means that he's happy with the arrangements.
Mhm.
He's not going to leave an army there to make sure Abraham behaves himself.
That's
Now
really
we come, yeah.
sorry. I was just looking at the tree, and it looks like it also has a lot of they have blossoms, I guess, at one time of the year as well. Just thinking that that would have been a beautiful sight as a reminder.
Did somebody send you flowers recently?
Actually, yeah, I got flowers from my mom and my husband. That was very nice.
Could you request tamarisk flowers next time?
Yeah, I'll be sure to.
That's good. You know, I've decided that there's something in male eyes that doesn't appreciate flowers.
Mm.
Those rods and cones migrated from our eyes onto our tongues so that we appreciate chocolate rather.
Well, I'll be sure to remember that when I come to visit you.
Okay, so you've got the statement, and there he worshipped the Lord, the eternal God.
Mhm, mhm.
What does that mean for you to say he worshipped the Lord, the eternal God?
Well, it has been Abraham's practice to always build an altar and sacrifice an animal as part of his worship wherever he traveled to. And I suspect that that's what's happened here as well.
Yeah, and
Good.
I'm just picturing after this, conflict is done and he has some quiet time digging the hole to plant the tamarisk tree, that he's also probably, in my mind, hopefully realizing that there was a lot of ego at play and maybe sort of letting that soften and letting that go a little bit, and then just sort of letting God come into that space again, and what that feels like maybe for him, realizing, yeah, actually this is the person who will sustain me, and he's here for the long haul and he's got my back. And yeah, I just imagine it would have been a very meditative time for him now.
Good
When
point.
you plant a tree, if you go camping for the weekend with your motorhome, do you plant a tree?
I don't think I've ever planted a tree, and it wouldn't be in a motorhome. It would be in my tent, but yeah.
So generally, when you plant a tree, it means that you have long term in mind.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So planting that tamarisk tree means that Abraham knows he's going to be around here for a long time.
Yeah, and I like how the storyteller in this sense now, ends it there with in the country he lived for a long time. It's poetic.
Yeah. But I'm still chasing this. Why does he worship the Lord, the eternal God? Now, I know it's his custom. But why is it his custom? And when he does it, what is he saying to himself in his mind? Well, let me try it from another angle. When do you worship the Lord apart from 11 o'clock on Saturday morning?
Well, picking up on what Sasha had shared, I think for me, it's at times of gratitude. When problems have been resolved, and I'm grateful for God's intervention, if that's been the case, or I perceive that that's the case, or just the benefit of having things resolved and moving forward. And so to me, that's a time to worship.
Yeah, I like that.
And so this has been a very significant meeting between himself and Abimelech and Phicol. and they've resolved a lot of issues amicably.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, I think that's the cause for his worshiping God, to express his gratitude for the leading of God and for the, we would say in our language, the ministry of the Holy Spirit in bringing about reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
For a very long time, Sasha already commented on that, Abraham's life is full of waiting. He waited for Isaac's birth for 25 years after God's promise. Of course, he'd been waiting already before that.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has a divine promise and he still waits 25 years. He waited for the land God had promised him, and it never materialized. Abraham never possessed any of the land except the plot he bought to bury Sarah. He'd also been promised a city whose maker is God, never materialized. He lived in tents all his life, perpetual camper. So Hebrews 11 makes mention of that. If we can read verse 8 to 10, Hebrews 11, verse 8 to 10.
It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. And even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God.
Wow. That suddenly made me sort of see it almost as a whole picture there. That's really cool.
So I'm going to hang around Abraham on the new earth, because sooner or later, God's going to show up and say, have a look, all this belongs to you. Remember what I promised you?
Mm-hmm.
And you see the new Jerusalem? It's all yours, buddy. That's what I promised you.
Yeah.
Just for a while.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I haven't lived in tents for a very long period of time. This man lived in tents for years, as did his descendants. But they were looking for a place that was a bit more solid than a tent, with foundations. And I think that's significant that it mentions foundations, because a tent has no foundation. You just take it wherever and you set it up and you're there. And then you can be gone within an hour and be someplace else. But a place with foundations means you're staying in this place. You're not moving around all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, with your tamarisk tree.
Yeah.
I think we know what's going to be beside Abram's house in heaven.
Revelation 14, verse 12 is appropriate at this point, when we've been talking about Abraham's waiting. Revelation 14:12.
This means that God's holy people must endure persecution patiently, obeying his commands and maintaining their faith in Jesus.
You know, it takes time for the consequences of our choices to play out. It doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it does. But most of the good consequences take a long time to play out. It seems to be in the nature of the freedom we enjoy. What is there that you are waiting for?
Well, I'm still waiting for that city with foundations, along with Abraham.
Yeah. Looking forward to the eating the leaves for the healing of the nations.
So on a more material note, I know you're looking forward to grandchildren, Sasha. Would you deny that?
Wow. I am in the thick of the teenage years right now. So I feel like I'm a
not?
little hazy at the future yet.
Okay, be brave, be brave.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. And yes, you know what? I talk about babies all the time, and there are very much parts of that I look forward to. Yeah.
Hmm. And Warren's vicariously looking forward to great grandchildren because of Cheryl.
I love it.
We're willing to wait and be patient on the great grands, though.
Okay.
How about you, Ian? What are you waiting for?
I keep telling people to stay healthy because I'd like them around in 20 years' time when I depart this world. So in a
Good.
sense,
That's
I'm
good.
waiting for 20 years' time.
Hmm.
I like it.
So look, this podcast that we've just done is a very human interaction between two men who are leaders in their own right, and how they resolve the matter, reconciled, and are able to live together for a long time. It is a monument to problem solving and reconciliation. This is a big story.
That's interesting because before our podcast, I was thinking, I wonder why this story is even included. It could have been left out and we wouldn't have missed anything significant.
Yeah.
But you've brought out the point that it is a significant story in showing just how people live their lives and how they deal with life. And that's worthwhile.
Well, if we had two men like this in the Gaza versus Israel situation, they could have worked something out together.
Mm-hmm.
But we're just lacking one or both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they hadn't worked it out, it could have very well ended up like the Israel-Gaza situation at present.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pray together. Dear God, thank you for working in our hearts for reconciliation with you and also with each other. We pray that we might be ministers of reconciliation because you have reconciled us to yourself at great cost. You're wonderful. You're a role model for us in every situation. We're so blessed to have you. Amen.
Amen.
The recording of our podcast on our website, as well as the PDF document that we've been using, so you can follow along or at least see all the passages. And so that website is rediscoveringgod.ca, and on there is the PDF document, the link for the podcast, as well as our YouTube link. We are now on YouTube. So if you want to see us live, then you can go and watch it on YouTube.
Wonderful. And we'd also love to invite you to our Monday evening Zoom discussion where Ian and Warren lead us out. And we are currently going through the podcast where we get to have discussion and really dive in a little deeper and get our most pressing questions answered. It's a really wonderful time of fellowship and connection with the group. We share in community and resources as well. We'd really love to have you join us. We're going to be meeting at 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. You just add in the link 403-506-9201. We'd love to see you.
And if you'd like to connect with us, you can reach us at rediscoveringgod20@gmail.com. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you and know how this journey of rediscovering the God that Jesus knew is changing your life. Take care.